From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now, or learn the stuff they don't want you to know.
Before we get started, there's a very important announcement, a trigger warning, a disclaimer. We are dealing with disturbing, very mature themes. You will encounter descriptions of sexual violence in today's episode, so be warned, this may not be suitable for all audiences.
Yeah, agreed. This is something that many of you have been hearing in the news lately. We've obviously been in a time that has been very challenging for a lot of folks in terms of the treatment of folks that are coming to this country from other countries. And some of the rhetoric behind that's been very strong, and some of the physical treatment and the, rounding up of children in camps, and the notion of images of kids being kept in cages and separated from their families, and, stuff that just has this real, just nasty dystopian kind of feel to it. And the story we're about to talk today is absolutely just an escalation of that in the worst, most invasive way one could imagine. Essentially, and this is all based on a whistleblower complaint, and it is under investigation. So I think, Ben, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but most of this is still falling under the category of allegedly. Would you agree?
So let's get into that a little further in depth.
Fair.
I would say.
I don't want to over caveat, but this is very sensitive stuff. The idea that the Department of Health and Human Services is investigating forced sterilizations, hysterectomies, being performed on immigrants in detainment, in a particular detainment center in Georgia. Our home state. Essentially a woman by the name of Dawn Wooten, who is a licensed practical nurse, submitted a 27 complaint and filed by Project South and the Government Accountability Project earlier this week, saying that she had heard reports from women in this center where she's working, this detainment center, saying that there had been a doctor coming around and essentially, without their permission, without consent, removing their uteruses, essentially, preventing them from ever having children.
Right. This is something that many of our fellow listeners have written in to ask us about, whether via social media, email, or our phone number. And there's one email in particular that was very to the point about this, correct?
That's right. It was Diana from Guatemala writing in just to say that she loves the show and was hoping that we would consider doing an episode on the allegations of ICE detention centers forcibly sterilizing women. I would agree, Ben, that this topic and a lot of the history that's wrapped up in this, because it's very triggering, brings to mind a lot of historical precedents that we'll talk about in a bit. But I think that it's possible that this might, as we follow the story, see where it leads, it might be worth a larger discussion, a full episode. But for now, I think we can kind of start the conversation here. So yeah, what we know thus far is what I said. There is a nurse who was reporting these occurrences of women in this detention center being forcibly sterilized, having hysterectomies performed on them, and it came from women essentially coming to her and feeling comfortable and saying, very matter-of-factly, referring to this one particular doctor as the uterus man or something like that. So there's some very dark, macabre, almost tongue-in-cheek kind of nickname that they had for this gentleman. Yeah, the uterus collector. That's right. Thanks, Doc. The uterus collector is what this gentleman's nickname was. Ben, what do we know about this doctor?
Right. So we know several pieces of confirmed information about this doctor. Dr. Mahindra Amin, Amin. Dr. Amin is the number one person accused by Wooten of conducting these forced non-consensual hysterectomies. A hysterectomy is, in these situations, it is a permanent procedure. It's not like vasectomy. You know what I mean? You can't realign the tubes and allow someone to enter the reproductive population once again. That is why this is largely considered, when proven, an indication of eugenics, of genocide. It qualifies as a war crime. This doctor is not an OBGYN, we know that. A spokesperson for the American Board of Obstetrics and Gynecology told the Daily Beast that this doctor was not board certified. Being board certified is typically a voluntary thing, a voluntary certification medical professionals take. This doctor did not do it. It did not in any way impede this doctor from conducting these alleged, and again, non-consensual hysterectomies. This is really recent news, by the way. We're recording this episode on September 21st. The whistleblower report came out in September, just earlier this month, and it's close to home for the stuff they don't want you to know family here, because it occurred, I guess we do have to say allegedly, it occurred at the Irwin County Detention Center in Georgia, which is a private entity. So please check out our earlier work on the problem with privatized prisons.
Yeah.
Now, this doctor who's received the brunt of these accusations denies it, and his lawyer made a statement saying that he looks forward to all the facts coming out. The accusations are going to be fully investigated by an independent office. However, ICE itself also disputes any of the implications that detainees are being used for, and this is the interesting somewhat telling part of the quote here: experimental medical procedures. I mean, at its heart, a hysterectomy or a this type of sterilization isn't really an experimental medical procedure. It's one that's very standard. I think it's interesting language. That's all I'm saying. And I do want to in a little bit talk about the history of government in the United States ordering experimental medical procedures that often affect people who are in minorities or people of color. But Matt, you had mentioned looking up some stats about laws surrounding this kind of thing in various parts of the country.
Yes, I want to talk about the history in the U.S. of laws that would essentially equate to sterilization abuse, really, is what it would be. Sterilizing someone against their will for a reason that the state has deemed would be appropriate. You have to go back to 1907 in Indiana when a law was passed there that was very much based on eugenics and essentially granting the right to sterilize someone that was seen not fit to be a part of the gene pool.
Someone with a low IQ, I believe, then there were terms that were established that were associated with these different folks, correct?
There were. And it began there in Indiana in 1907, and then it trickled out into 30 plus other states within the United States. And, with all of those laws that, went out there into the states, around, at least according to CNN, around 60,000 people were sterilized in procedures that would qualify as being compulsory or forced sterilizations.
The majority of whom were women, by the way. Or if you want to, the majority of whom had female biological sex, given the misogyny of the time. I think it's also important to point out that the Nazi government took the results of this, took the statistics here from this practice that went on for decades, and used that data as a rationalization, or in their mind, an indication that non-consensual sterilization was both feasible and humane in the great mission to mold humans into whatever giving governments ephemeral idea of what a quote-unquote good person is supposed to be. This is This is something that should be very close to home to everyone listening to this show, or if this is a YouTube clip, to this YouTube clip. Forcible sterilization is occurring not just in the US, but in multiple parts of the world. We've talked at length about the ongoing mistreatment of people who are on the wrong side of the North Korean regime or government. We've also talked about ethnic minorities in the PRC in China. People are being forcibly sterilized, and they're being forcibly sterilized because we are past the point of the 1930s. We are past the point of Unit 731 in World War II or the atrocities of the Nazi Party. Forced sterilization is never an accident. Forced sterilization at scale is by design, and it is by design shot like an arrow through the air toward a very specific goal or target. And that target is ultimately the eradication of a certain population based on their ethnicity, based on their perceived difference from a dominant majority.
Mm-hmm. That's right, and we've seen that throughout history. Like Matt, the study, the research that you're referring to, and the really disgusting part of our history as a country, started off being white men that were being forcibly sterilized by and large, and they applied terms like feeble-minded or unfit to be part, like you said, unfit to be part of the gene pool, and
mentally
it was a
defective.
form of eugenics. That's right, mentally defective. But then it became much more focused from 1937 to 1966, by the way. Yikes. It was black women who were most likely to be forcibly sterilized by the government. And, you know, desegregation was happening. There was a sense of like, how do we shadow ban these people and keep them from, reproducing? There's no other way around it. It was absolutely based on racism and stereotypes around quote unquote mental fitness, to be part of society. And look, I don't want anyone to accuse us of jumping the gun or being alarmist about this one isolated case of this potentially rogue doctor who may not have even done these things. He's denying it. We'll let the facts fall where they may. But guys, I mean, we were talking a little bit off mic, and it sure feels like this has intention behind it.
Well, yeah, when there are clear historical examples that you can point to of the same thing happening or very, very similar things happening, it certainly lends it to feel, at least, as though there's more credence to the claims, even if they are as of yet unproven or as of yet proven. That's certainly the way it feels with this. Although, this is a topic that I think everyone is going to feel strongly about. And I would say 99% of people would be against this. I certainly hope so. But it feels as though something that is pulling at our emotional heartstrings. So I would just say personally, it makes me feel a bit cautious.
In what sense?
Just a bit when thinking about perhaps there's something more at play here. I think we have to keep that option open until it's proven.
Right.
And I would just say there has to be some kind of internal investigation or third-party investigation to see if any of these claims are true.
Yeah, that's one of the issues. One thing I respect about our whistleblower here, Ms. Wooten, if you are listening, is that there's not hyperbolic language in the report. It's a 27-page report, which you can find online. And in that, Wooten is clearly saying this occurs in the Irwin Detention Center. There are no sensationalistic nor alarmist claims about some sort of countrywide or nationwide sterilization initiative. And you're right, we have to be careful about the court of public opinion, because one problem with the court of public opinion is that it doesn't care whether it's right or wrong. Because, you print the headline one week, you print the retraction on page 32 the next week, right? But this is this is fundamentally, if it occurs, an unclean thing. Now, there's a great argument to be made, or a valid argument to be made, that even in the realm of medicine, mistakes can happen, right? Let's not forget that there are people who are lauded surgeons, medical professionals in their field, and even they have, for one doofy, innocent reason or another, accidentally sewn someone up and left left a surgical instrument in them, right? What I'm saying is mistakes happen, but this is if all of this is true, and there is copious eyewitness, evidence or hearsay about this, if all of this is true, then that's a very, very specific kind of mistake to make over a very widespread amount of a population. You know what I mean? Like you can plausibly, I'm trying to think of a good analogy. You can plausibly fall into someone and bump them if you're walking by, right? You can lose your balance. But if you continue doing that, and every person that you, quote, accidentally fall into has strong demographic similarities, and eventually you have to ask, is this person really falling? Are they really making a mistake? Or are they pushing these people? And I'm not at all equivocating the gravity of those things. Pushing someone on the street because you're a jerk is a lot different from removing someone's ability to reproduce, effectively ending their genetic lineage on this planet. But that, to be clear, if these allegations are true, that is what we are talking about.
Yeah.